Hi everyone. Good morning. I'm Anushka. As Amishi mentioned, it's really amazing to see so many people out here on a Saturday morning. Quite frankly, I fell into the category that Amishi spoke about, which was asleep on a Saturday morning. I've made it to precisely one creative morning in the past. Because of that, precisely the last couple of ones I was actually traveling. It was the one that was actually at G5A Amishi, and this lane is really special to me because I spent 5 years of thought over design down the road at Turf Estate in one of our offices right here in Shakti Mills. So really good to see everyone this morning. And as I mentioned, I'm the founder and creative director of Thought Over Design. I'm not going to spend too much of today's talk on what we do, but I thought I'd take a couple of minutes just to give those of you who may not know about the studio a little bit of context. So, Thought Over Design is a brand strategy and design studio. We're not a 360-degree advertising agency. We're not a marketing agency. We're not a social media agency. We're very much rooted in understanding consumer insight and building brands that actually talk to consumers and are very relevant to consumers today. Over the last 10 years, yeah, it's been 10 years now that we've been doing this. We've had the opportunity of working with so many brands across the spectrum. And we kind of stumbled upon this interest in consumer brands. Initially, when I just started out, I didn't really know what I was doing, and I think we kind of stumbled upon this as a process of discovering working with different brands. And the thing we enjoy the most is working directly with founders who are building these brands from ground up and are doing very interesting things no matter the category. A lot of the times we're working with brands that you may not have even heard of, but then years later or a couple of months later, you might discover them. So when we worked with Nykaa.com, actually, not very many people knew about them. And of course, it's a great moment of pride to see their, when I saw their IPO posters and billboards all over the city. So we do a lot of foundational work with brands. In addition to the work we do with brands, because I'm a graphic designer and my background is in design, it's really important for us to have a point of view. And that point of view is what I think makes the work we do slightly different from what's out there. This was a small project I took up in the pandemic. It was called Pretty Plated Waste. It's just a small Instagram handle that I created, which was basically around plating waste in an aesthetic manner after I was done eating it before composting it into a plate. So this was just a fun activity I picked up in the pandemic. Something that we're very passionate about at the studio is picking projects that mean a lot to us. And we're primarily, a women-driven team. Although there are men on the team, it's just happened as a happy coincidence that there's a lot of women on our team. And a couple of years ago, Fair and Lovely rebranded to Glow and Lovely. And I think there was a lot of media around that rebrand. If you were a designer or someone in marketing, you definitely heard a lot about it. Some of us felt the rebrand was a little bit of an optical situation, and we took a little bit of a interesting take on it and created this really fun packaging, which is completely, fictitious, which is basically bottling concepts of colonialism and colorism into bottles, but selling them in a really beautiful packaging, so people think it's actually great to buy. Just fun stuff to kind of portray our point of view to people. Something I also really sort of struggled with growing up as a young girl was body image issues, specifically to do with my skin. I grew up with a lot of skin issues because of PCOD. I have a lot of stretch marks because I grew tall really quickly. Who knew that would give you stretch marks? And so there's a small project that I took on where I wrote a little bit of poetry and shot some photographs of myself, and a friend also contributed some of her photos of just skin in the most unapologetic manner. So just a little bit of background to understand the point of view we bring to our projects. So thank you, Amishi, for having me today. Honestly, when I heard about this theme, I was a bit nervous because I saw the illustration and it was a phoenix rising, and I absolutely do not associate myself with that. I think a lot of people, when they think of someone, when they see in the public sphere, or when they see the work that you're putting out there, you think that this person is really successful, they've done really well for themselves, they're probably in a good place in life, and you really think of this trajectory as a upward trajectory, right? But I think a little differently, yeah, because I think I know so many creative people in the industry, and literally every single day is kind of like an upward and downward graph. Okay, there is of course a destination, and hopefully it'll move upwards. Sometimes it doesn't, but there's a daily up and down that you're going through. The way I look at it is that you're going from like one version of hell to like another version of fresh hell. I don't know, like for me at least, over the years, I feel like even though you're moving upwards, you're kind of dealing with new challenges. I know a couple of people in the audience here, and we chat and we literally talk about a lot of our challenges, and it's genuinely something that every year you're like, okay, this is some kind of new fresh hell. I thought it would be easier. I'm in my 9th year now. I'm in my 10th year now. So I just want to kind of put it out there that this talk is not going to be about like, me rising to the occasion of something, but just about the process of rising, when the occasion asks for it. So I think the baseline here is that you just keep kind of going through life being like, okay, cool, I got this. And that's pretty much, I think, the way my life has progressed as well. And also, I think that, you look at life, sometimes you tend to think of people's graphs as one graph, but, there's a work graph, your professional life is going in a certain direction. There's a personal life graph, and it could be going all over the place. I think your relationships with your family really impact your work, your relationships with your friends, what's going on in current events right now. I think the pandemic took a really huge mental toll on all of us. And for me, personally, that was a really hard time to keep the business afloat, pay salaries. And this is stuff that's affecting your personal life and then also in turn affects your professional life. I think health is super important as a discussion, right? I think this is something I talk about to my team as well, that you need to kind of take care of yourself first before sort of pouring in things into your work. And with health, and I would say health encompasses mental health as well, and I'll talk about that a little bit because I do believe in therapy, and I do believe in sort of taking care of yourself. I think your health can kind of go all over the place, and you really need to kind of balance these different graphs out. For comic relief, if you're single like me, there's also your dating life that you need to consider. And if you happen to be dating in the modern world with apps, there's sometimes a completely downward slope because you're trying to figure out a new dynamic with people in your other relationships as well. So really, I think that when you looked at the first graph, which is about rising upwards, I think really what people's lives look like is more like this, which is a combination of different things going up and down, and really about how you manage all of that and keep some of your goals up front so that you can move upwards in certain aspects of your life. So I'd like to take a moment now to zoom into some ups and downs, and I thought I would make this talk a little bit more personal because I think a lot of our work is up online, a lot of the journey is also up online. So I really want to take a moment to talk about some personal things that happened in my life that brought me to where I am today and where the team is today. So in 2005, when I finished high school, I was in Bombay studying in HR college. I don't know how many of you have studied in Bombay, but I was studying in 2005 in Bombay, and the only option that you really had was doing a BCom. And at that point, the course of like BMM and things like that you guys have access to now was not even known. So really, I didn't have the resources to go abroad, and the idea was to kind of continue going to college over here. And I just had to do whatever I could to avoid going to BCom, because the idea over there was that I would just be kind of bunking class, not doing anything really exciting. And some of my friends actually applied to the BMM course, which is a bachelor's in mass media. And I have to submit that I had absolutely no interest in mass media or advertising. And I didn't even know what it was. I just knew that I'm slightly creative, and so maybe I can give it a shot because some of my good friends are going there. So I spent 3 years at Jai Hind, and honestly, that was a very, very good experience for me because it gave me exposure to different aspects of media, like media planning, advertising, radio, all of these things. And at the end of that course, you would imagine that, I was fully prepared to go in and take on a job in advertising or some kind of media institute. And I had done many internships. By the way, I'm one of those people who had like 11 internships by the time I was 21 years old. So I had done a lot of internships at different ad agencies, different journalism, sort of, news agencies and things like that to get a flavor of what I liked and what I maybe didn't like. What I realized at the end of this whole thing was that advertising, which is what I majored in, was something that didn't interest me at all, and it wasn't really my area of sort of interest in terms of even working at an ad agency. And at that time, when I interned with a couple of ad agencies, I realized that it's a really big setup, and you're like this one little dot in this really big setup, and I didn't know where I could find my feet or what I would do there. So I just kind of realized advertising wasn't for me, and I was at this crossroads, and I was feeling absolutely dejected because I spent 3 years of my life on this course that actually was great fun, but in the end, it didn't really have a relevant career path for me. This is when I kind of discovered design. And guys, honestly, like for me, when I say discovering design, of course, design is a big part of when you're studying media, but I thought designing PPTs was design. I thought getting into Photoshop and playing with shadows, layers, and lighting effects was design. I thought, making things look pretty was design. I didn't really know anything about design as a tool for problem solving. I didn't know anything about design as a means to create things that have an impact. So for me, I had never even understood the concept of branding before this. So I want to talk about a small conversation that really changed my life at the time. One of my mom's friends was pretty high up at Saatchi and Saatchi, and she said, why don't you go and have a conversation with him since he runs an advertising agency? Maybe you can learn something from that conversation. So I went in there and pretty dejected about like, okay, I'm going to meet someone who's working in advertising and telling them that I actually don't want a job here. My mom's forced me to come and meet you, and he said, why don't you show me what you're interested in? And I kind of started talking to him about it. And he said, it seems like you're interested in branding, design, and those kind of things. And I was like, what's that? Because I literally had no idea. I didn't even know that a school called NID existed. I didn't even know a school called Srishti existed. I had no clue about these things. This was well before I think there was too much of the internet. And I then started researching about this. And I realized that, okay, there's going to be another situation here because NID has an entrance test that you take well before the actual application process starts, and then you get an interview, and then you get a test, and all of these other aspects, and it's a 4.5 year course. So I was pretty dejected at this point, thinking that, okay, I'm going to spend another 4 to 4.5 years on figuring out my career. This is when I kind of discovered Srishti, and they had another option for a 2.5 year program. And story for another day, but I kind of got in there on a very last minute basis, and I graduated from there in 2010. I just want to kind of emphasize on the point here, a lot of people who kind of apply to the studio and work with us come from different backgrounds. They maybe haven't studied design before. They've kind of self-taught this, and I think it's fantastic. But for me personally, my design education, I have a lot to sort of give it credit, because I really feel that the foundation that they taught us about problem solving, about understanding people, about understanding culture, about understanding how things work, and the little details of vernacular and things like that, it made such a huge difference to my practice today being a creative director. Post that, I kind of took up a job at another agency. It was a startup, and it was my first and only job, which I did for about 2 years. I think at this point what happened was that I got a bit burnt out. I don't know how many of you here have ever experienced that, but I was working 12-hour days, and I was extremely bad with planning my time. I had also moved from the first designer in the company to the creative director of the company, managing 15 other designers across Bombay and Delhi, and I was not equipped with the tools to manage that kind of responsibility. And that really kind of took a toll on me, and I just decided to quit. I had another existential crisis at this time, and I was like, I don't even know if I want to be in the creative industry. I feel completely burnt out. I feel like people don't value it. And honestly, I think a lot of us kind of go through that on a daily basis with our interactions. And it's true, we should kind of accept that as well. And at that point for me, it was kind of like taking a step back to see what else I could do. At this point, I want to kind of bring in another graph, which is kind of like a personal life graph. And this is when I sort of decided to go and learn to become a dive master in the Andamans. I decided to leave the city. I felt very claustrophobic over here. And I went to the Andaman Islands to learn to become a dive master. And I spent about 4.5, 5 months over there. It's been 10 years since this experience, and till today, I will say that this has been the most fulfilling experience of my life. I had no idea what I was doing for work. I had no idea what I was going to get back to in terms of my career when I got back to Bombay. But I was in a completely different context, in a completely different situation, and it had nothing to do with creativity, design, or anything to do with my career. It had, though, everything to do with learning about people, how they respond to you when you're teaching them in a very difficult environment, how you can deal with them when they're very vulnerable. And I think those were the very key learnings I got from my time becoming a dive master. And I think that's really helped me with building the culture for our team that Amishi was talking about, and I'll get into as well. So, a little bit of a quick trajectory over here. I came back to Bombay, I started freelancing, and I realized I absolutely hate working alone. I don't know how many of you are here like this. I know a lot of designers love kind of getting into their own bubble and doing their thing. I'm someone who loves working with people, I thrive with people around me. I also discovered a thing called anxiety at this point, and found help for that. But it is something I deal with even today. And I discovered being broke because, quite honestly, I was done with all of my funds that I spent doing the course of the dive master. And so at this point, I was pretty confused. Should I find another job or should I do my own thing? And I think a lot of us here face this sort of dilemma at many points in our lives. And I was all of 24 to 25 when I was at this point. To be honest, I thought that I would apply for jobs, which is what I did. I really wanted to find a mentor. I felt I didn't have one in the design industry at all. So I sort of applied to various jobs, and guess what? I actually didn't get any of them because I was either apparently overqualified, or I wasn't interested in the very specific role or task they had for me. I didn't want to just be a graphic designer. I didn't want to just do one particular job. I was interested in so many different things. And I think with that kind of experience of only 2 years, it's actually not possible to get a job of that nature. You do need to do something specific and technical. So, I think sometimes decisions just make themselves, and thank God for that because that's what happened in my case. So, a little story. When I graduated from Srishti back in 2010, my father asked me a question. He said, okay, I really want you to start your own business. Why don't you give me a company name? At this point, I had no inclination of starting a business, but he wanted to create like a company deed for me with my mom and me as co-founders, and that's what he did. And he asked me, what do you want to name this? At that point, I was doing a project at Srishti, which was called Vision Oversight, and the platform with which that project was being handled was something I named Thought Over Design, which was basically an ethos for projects that will always have an intention behind design work that happens. So I just named it that, and basically at this point I decided that I'm going to basically work under this banner for the next couple of years and see what happens. So I want to take you through a little bit of the trajectory over here as well. So the first office we had in 2013 was in my dad's factory. My dad runs a metalworking shop in Ray Road, and that was the first office we had. It was just me working in a little windowless cabin inside this Ray Road Baikala factory. The second office was a two-person room. It was literally the size of a desk with enough space for two chairs, and it was me and one other person that I had hired at the time. In 2015, we moved to a slightly larger office, which was our first ever formal office space. And even that one was sublet because I didn't have the money to rent anything specifically on my own. This was a real learning point because it actually literally fell apart. The rain came and the false ceiling fell on all the iMacs, and we literally had to move like overnight to another office. And a year later, we moved to the office that I was talking about in Shakti Mill Lane. When the pandemic hit, we had to sort of shut shop. We couldn't afford the rent, and we moved to an online model, much like most of us over here. And back into 2023, when I was looking for offices, we almost signed up another space. And we don't talk about this enough, but we spent money on getting an architect on board. We spent legal fees on doing things, and it just fell through with the landlord because they were being really difficult. So, this was a really difficult time in my experience as well, because I literally thought that I needed to maybe reevaluate what I was doing, whether I had the funds to get an office actually. Cut to June 2023, we actually found another space, and I just want to kind of take you through that. That's where we are right now, and this is in Fort in DN Road. And as a little girl, I always dreamed of sort of having an office in this locality. This is just a couple of snapshots of the space. That's Aditya, project manager, who's sitting right here in the space, and I'm really proud of the space that we've created over time. I want to talk a little bit about luck and people at this point. I know a lot of us believe in luck, and I think it's really important to be present when there is luck being thrown your way. You need to show up every day for the luck to actually work in that case. So I don't think it's going to happen if you don't show up and if you don't go through the hard times and make it every day, every morning, doing something consistently. I also really think what's been a key aspect of my growth and life has been people. And it's been the absolute most important thing for me. And I want to kind of talk about that a little bit. I know I may be running over time, but Amishi, I hope I can go on for a couple of more minutes. Okay, great. So at Thought of a Design, a couple of things that are really important is the internal team, the clients we work with, the ex-TOD family. I'm actually in touch with almost every person who's worked at the studio in the past. Our collaborators, some of them are in the audience. Sarang, you work with us so closely and it's been great. Mentors and friends, people who I actually adopt as life coaches, as agony aunts, people I call up and really take advice from. My family, who's really important and has been an integral part of my process. And I would urge everyone here who might be starting a new business or having a tough time in their career, please always kind of have a good base with family and friends to support you. Another important aspect of running a creative business is everything legal and financial. And I think it's important to understand that maybe you don't have the knowledge to be able to do these things. And so it's great to always have a set of advisors that can help you on these things with regards to IP, with regards to ownership, billings. All of these things are really important. And actually, it was the third thing after the first employee I hired. It was the third thing I got on board was a legal advisor and a financial advisor to the company. So this is the team structure today. We're 22 people, and we have a business development team, an HR and ops team, project management, strategy and insights, design and copy. We also have external advisors that I mentioned earlier, like legal, financial, all of these things. And we have a lot of external collaborators we work with because we're not able to afford to have a very large in-house team. So we work with a lot of typographers, illustrators, photographers, filmmakers, whatever is needed across the board. That's the team presently, and it's honestly been a great experience building this team, and it's one of the most important factors of running the studio. Over here, I'd just like to talk a little bit about the culture that we've built in the studio. And this comes from the very simple reason, and I didn't get into this earlier. Why did I not kind of go ahead and take up a job, and why did I kind of start the company? One of the reasons, yes, I wasn't able to find the right job. But the second thing was I wanted to choose the people I wanted to work with. And I wanted to choose the clients I wanted to work with. And one of the most important aspects of building a team, I feel, is having a positive space and a safe space in which they can thrive. And this is something when I was growing up, I didn't really see that often. I would see creative people getting burnt out. I would see people getting out of office at 11 p.m., 12 a.m. And it was just not something I wanted to kind of condone. So I think that this is one of the main reasons I've sort of built a team of this nature. We're almost like friends, honestly. There's a couple of people over here in the audience from the team as well. And I'd like to believe that, it's a safe space for people to work in. So a couple of things I thought I'd end the talk with in terms of what I've learned from the constant rise and fall. And it is continuing. There's a rise and fall almost every day. The thing about expectations, just don't have any. I think you can plan to a certain extent about life. You can plan a lot of things, but things are going to go the way they're going to go. And being a person that deals with anxiety, it's difficult to handle this kind of up and down. But try not to have too many expectations. And when you have them, at least communicate them and be clear about them. For me, personally, business is personal. A lot of people tell me, I should remove myself from the business and not take things personally or not do things only because I like them. Unfortunately, that's why I started the business. I started it because I wanted to work with brands and people that are doing things that make an impact in the world. If I choose to work with a business that's not doing the kind of work that I would condone, why would I choose to work with that business? And I think today, as designers, we all have a very privileged position to pick and choose the people we work with, the businesses we enable, and the kind of culture we're creating in the world as well. Um, Saying no is a superpower. Amishi and me were having this chat earlier, and I think in the year, more than saying yes to projects, we are saying no. There's reasons for that. Either people don't have the time because they can't invest the time in what we're proposing for them to do. Either they just don't have the kind of they don't have the kind of vision that we feel is required to make that kind of work happen. So a lot of the times we say no as well. Another reason to say no is when, I think when you're running a creative business, someone comes to you and they're like, oh, you're doing my branding, do my performance marketing, do my social media, do this, do that. Oh, I love you, do this. Sometimes you gotta just say that, hey, is the money more important or is the quality of work that I'm going to provide more important? And I'm very honest with clients that, hey, I'm ready to build a skill set to help you, but give me time, or I can't actually do this particular thing because it's just not something I have the knowledge for. And considering some of us are technical in nature, and me being a designer, I really don't feel comfortable just hiring someone and saying, okay, you figure this out and you do it. I like to be involved in the process in whatever way that's possible. Today's a great example. Please meet people around, because I think your network can really be your support system. In my case, it has been. Someone gave me advice very early on in my career and said that, look, if you don't know how to do something, just pick up the phone and call someone. Literally, for the first few years, I used to call up friends who were lawyers, friends who were CAs, friends who've run other studios, friends who work in different kind of industries, and ask them for advice. People are really always happy to help if you ask nicely, and your network can really be your support system, even in terms of difficulty and when you're facing a difficult situation with a client or payments or anything like that. Own your strengths, but also your discomforts. I think a lot of people talked about this. I was watching Sana's talk the other day at Creative Mornings, and she spoke about not being comfortable with finance and accounting. And I think even for me, that was something I didn't really know. I didn't know what a P&L was. I didn't know what a cash flow statement was. But these are things you've got to sort of learn over time, but be comfortable with the fact that you don't know it, so that you're open to learning it as well, right? It could be anything for that matter. Kindness is underrated, especially in our industry. I think people are always very transactional about things. But I really feel like as creative people, we need a safe space to work with each other. And you can make an effort to be kinder than you are. You can have kindness as an agenda. So make that a like an agenda that you set for yourself, that you're going to work in a kinder manner with people. If you're not liking how someone works with you, tell them nicely and kind of work it out with them if you can. So I think it's really important, because people are dealing with their own struggles, and the least you can do is kind of deal with things kindly. And the last thing here I want to say is that for me, structure enables creativity. A lot of people ask me, like, hey, are you a more creative person? Are you the more business person in your team? What is it that you do? And for me, I think my creativity is enabled by the structures I create for myself, whether it's a daily routine, whether it's a process at the studio, or whether it's, sort of the way we deal with clients. And all of those things kind of enable that chaos to happen a lot more organically. So yeah, with that, I'll end my talk. I think for me, it was about rising every day and sort of showing up for yourself. And I recently started investing, and they keep saying don't underestimate the power of compounding. And I think that's really important. So even with yourself, don't underestimate the power of compounding. And if you just show up every day, something's gonna happen.